This video is over lessons 35 and 36. Lesson 35, Writing Decimal Numbers as Fractions, Part 1, Reading and Writing Decimal Numbers, and Lesson 36, Subtracting Fractions and Mixed Numbers from Whole Numbers. Take a moment to copy this down into your notes, and then continue the video when you're ready. It will move on in 3, 2, 1. Reading decimal numbers is actually quite easy. For example, let's take a look at this number. If we see this, we would say 24.007. So what you should see here is we say the whole number, and then we say the point, and then we name each decimal place. So there's a 0, a 0, and a 7. So if we saw an example like this, we would say 0.35. Again, we say the whole number, which this time is just a placeholder for the whole numbers. There are no whole numbers in this number, but we say the placeholder 0, followed by the point, and then each decimal place. So 3, 5. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. To write a decimal in words, follow these 3 steps. Step 1, write the whole number in words, followed by and. Now you're going to skip this step if there are no whole numbers. Step 2, write the decimal places as if they were a whole number. And step 3, write the last decimal place value. So let's go back to our previous example. 24.007. So if I want to write this out in words, step 1, write the whole number in words. So 24. Remember that 2-digit numbers like this get hyphenated, followed by the word and. That's step 1. Step 2, write the decimal places as if they were a whole number. So I've already taken care of 24, so I'm just going to look here at these decimal places. So I got 007. Well, if I treated that as a whole number, the zeros would disappear. So really all I have is 7. So write 7. Followed finally by step 3, write the last place value. So we just reviewed that in a previous video. This is the ones place. After that is the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, mirroring the whole number place values. So last place is the thousandths. And there it is, 24 7/7. Now let's try our other example, 0.35. So, since this is just a placeholder, there are no whole numbers. So we're going to skip step 1. So moving on to step 2, I'm going to pretend that my decimal places are a whole number. If they were, that would be 35. 35, and again this 2-digit number here, don't forget to hyphenate it. Step 3, write the last place value. So this would be the ones place, this would be the tenths, and this would be the hundredths. So, in words, 0.35 is 35 hundredths. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. To write a decimal in numerals, we're going to follow these 3 steps. Step 1, write the whole number in numerals followed by a decimal point. If there is no whole number, then write 0 as a placeholder. So if we remember back to what we just did, between the whole number and the decimal places we put the word AND. So if there is no AND, you know that all you have are decimal places. And so you're going to put your 0 in. Step 2, leave enough room so that there are enough spaces for the last decimal place value. And then step 3, write the number for the decimal places. Fill in any extra spaces with 0. So let's take a look at an example. Let's do 16 and 5 hundredths. So step 1, we're going to write the whole number. Well, I have the word AND here, so that means this is my whole number and this is my decimal number. So I'm going to write the whole number in numerals, followed by a decimal point. So I'm going to take my 16 then, and write it in numerals. Which I'll do that out here. So 16, followed by a decimal point. Step 2, I'm going to leave enough room so that there's enough spaces for the last decimal value. Well, the last decimal value was this word right here, hundredths. So I'm going to need a space after my ones for the tenths, and then the next place will be the hundredths. And then finally, step 3, I'm going to write in the number for the decimal places. So my decimal number is 5, so I'm going to come over here and put the 5 right there. Make sure you put it all the way in at the end, because if you put it here instead, then when I fill in the extra spaces with zeros, that's going to end up being a 50 instead of a 5. So let's slide that back over there, and then, as we kind of alluded to here, we're going to fill the extra spaces with zeros, and so my number is 16.05. Now let's try 27, don't forget your hyphen, thousandths. So, step 1, write the decimal whole number. Well, remember the decimal whole number is separated by AND. Well, there is no AND here. So we're going to go to this part. If there is no whole number, then we're going to write 0 as our placeholder. So I've got 0 followed by a decimal. Moving on to step 2, we're going to leave enough room so that there's enough spaces for the last place value. So my last place value here is the thousandths. So after the ones, I have the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And then finally step 3, write in the number for the decimal places. So there's my 27. So 27. Remember to put it all the way at the end, because if we put it here, then when we fill in the zeros and the empty spaces, this will end up looking like 270, but that's not what it says. So make sure that's all the way at the end, so that when I fill in 0 into the empty space, my decimal places still look like a 27. And there it is, 0.027. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. We've actually done this lesson a little bit backwards, because once we know how to write decimals in words, it actually becomes extremely easy to convert them into fractions. So for example, let's take our number 0.35. If we remember back, 0.35 in words was 35 hundredths. Now the homework, you don't necessarily have to write that out, which is why I'm writing in red, but it's good to think about it. Because all I'm going to do now is take this and write this, but as a fraction. So 35 hundredths. So hundredths would mean my denominator is 100. Now, of course, since this is a fraction, we need to remember to reduce it. So I can see, because this ends in a 5 and that ends in a 0, that these are both reducible by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. 7 and 20 cannot be reduced, and so 0.35 is 7/20. Let's take a look at our other example now. 24.007. And if I want to write this as a fraction, or more appropriately as a mixed number, think about how it was written in words. So 24 and 7 thousandths. So now I'm just going to take that thinking that I did there and write it as a fraction or a mixed number. So I have 24 and 7 thousandths. Well, thousandths means I have a denominator of 1,000. 7 and 1,000 cannot be reduced at all, and so there's my answer. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Speaking of mixed numbers, we're going to now take a look at how to subtract mixed numbers and fractions from whole numbers. So let's go ahead and start with a problem. Let's go 4, and we are going to subtract 2/5. What I would like you to do in this problem is to set it up vertically. So 4, and then underneath the whole number should be another whole number. But 2/5 doesn't have a whole number on it, which means that its whole number is really 0. And then we have the 2/5 out here. Now when we subtract, we always start with the little stuff first. So we have nothing minus 2/5. Well, that's a problem. We can't do that. So what we're going to need to do is borrow. So I'm going to borrow from the 4, and the 4 becomes a 3. So I have taken off 1. So we need to consider 1 is worth how much? Well, in order to subtract fractions, we need to have a common denominator. So that means whatever it's worth has to be in fifths. Well, if we think through our forms of 1, what form of 1 would have a 5 as a denominator? Well, 5/5. So that 1 that I borrowed is going to be worth 5/5. And we subtract now. So 5/5 minus 2/5 gives me 3/5. And then 3 minus 0 is 3. And that's how we do it. Let's do one more example, this time with a mixed number. So let's go with 8 minus 3 and 5/7. So we're going to set it up vertically. 8, and then underneath the whole number goes the other whole number, so 3, and then the 5/7 goes off to the side there. Just like before, I can't take nothing and subtract something, so I need to borrow. I borrow from the 8, making it a 7, which means we've taken off 1. So how much is that 1 worth? Well, in order to subtract a fraction minus a fraction, I need to have a common denominator. So I need that denominator to be a 7. Well, what over 7 is 1? 7 over 7. So, 7 over 7. And we subtract 7/7 minus 5/7 is 2/7. And 7 minus 3 is 4. And there it is. Now on your homework, don't write these problems twice. Just write them vertically and get your answer. You do not have to write them like that. So skip the horizontal, just go straight to the vertical and do the problem. This video ends in 3, 2, 1.